The brass key turned smoothly in the lock with a thick, metallic click. When Arthur pushed open the heavy oak door, the scent of fresh chalk and old paper washed over him. Inside, 30 wooden desks sat in perfect rows under the pale glow of his flashlight. On the teacher's podium, a ceramic coffee cup was still steaming in the damp air. Arthur stepped closer, his boots heavy against the floorboards. That was when he heard it. A quiet, rhythmic scraping sound coming from the chalkboard at the front of the room. Someone was writing. But the room was completely empty, and 3 hours later, when the sun rose, that door would not be there at all. To understand why that night still keeps Arthur awake, we have to start at the beginning. In October of 2019, Arthur accepted a job as the head night custodian at Miller Creek High School. It was a sprawling brick facility built in 1962, holding over 1,200 students during the day. But between 10 at night and 6 in the morning, the building belonged entirely to Arthur. His duties were simple and predictable. Mop the linoleum, lock the perimeter doors, and check the furnace room. He memorized every corner of the facility using a laminated ring binder left behind by the previous custodian. Every room had a place, and every number followed a precise sequence. The second floor of Wing C was the quietest section of the building. It housed the social studies and history classrooms, numbered sequentially from room 201 to room 212. At the far end of the hallway past room 212 sat a solid concrete support wall that formed the exterior shell of the building. Arthur knew that floor plan by heart. However, on his second week, while sorting through the master keyring in the main office, he noticed an unfamiliar key. It was heavy, tarnished brass, with no stamped label or room identifier. When he asked the evening supervisor about it, the man simply shrugged and said it had been on the ring for decades. It was the night of November 3rd, shortly after 1 in the morning, when Arthur began his rounds on the second floor of Wing C. The hallway was dark, illuminated only by the amber emergency exit signs at either end. As he pushed his cleaning cart past room 210, he noticed a cold draft cutting through the warm air. It was unusual because the upper floor windows were sealed shut for the season. Following the chill, Arthur walked to the dead end of the corridor. Where the solid concrete wall should have been, there was now a recessed alcove. Resting inside that alcove was a dark wooden door with a brass plate that read room 213. Arthur stood motionless in the dim hallway. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the laminated floor plan binder. He shone his flashlight directly onto the map. Wing C clearly terminated at room 212. There was no room 213 on any blueprint ever created for Miller Creek High School. Beyond that threshold was 40 feet of open air above the courtyard below. Yet there the door stood, solid and real. Arthur reached for his key ring. His fingers instinctively guided the untagged brass key into the keyhole. It slotted in with perfect precision. With a soft click, the heavy lock yielded and the door swung inward without a single sound. The flashlight beam cut through a thick veil of suspended dust inside. The room was expansive, far larger than any standard classroom in the building. Wooden student desks from the 1950s were arranged in neat, immaculate rows. Black chalkboards lined 3 walls, covered in dense, cursive writing that stretched from corner to corner. Arthur stepped over the threshold, feeling the temperature drop noticeably. He aimed his light at the central teacher desk. On top rested an open attendance ledger, a steel fountain pen, and a ceramic mug filled with dark coffee. When Arthur approached the desk, he noticed something impossible. The coffee inside the mug was still steaming. Arthur raised his light to read the cursive text scrawled across the chalkboard. The same sentence was written hundreds of times in white chalk. "We are waiting for the final bell." The handwriting was precise, sharp, and identical on every panel. Arthur leaned down toward the open attendance ledger on the desk. The dates listed along the margin ranged from October 1963 to November 1963, but every single student name had been carefully blacked out with heavy ink. That was when the air in the room shifted. A faint, collective breathing filled the space around him, coming from the empty wooden desks behind his back. Panic seized him instantly. He spun around, sweeping his flashlight across the rows. The desks were vacant, yet the sound of rustling papers and soft sliding shoes echoed off the floorboards. Then came the sound of chalk, pressing hard against slate behind him. Arthur did not turn around to look. He bolted toward the doorway, his heart hammering against his ribs. He slammed the heavy oak door shut behind him and shoved the brass key into the lock, turning it until the deadbolt engaged. Standing alone in the dimly lit corridor of Wing C, Arthur leaned against the wall, chest heaving, listening to the muffled sound of a bell ringing from inside the locked room. If you were captivated by these strange encounters, please consider liking the video and subscribing to join our community. Arthur ran down the stairs to the facilities office, pulling out the original blueprints stored in the metal vault. He spread the large, yellowed schematics across his desk under the harsh fluorescent tubes. He traced his finger down Wing C. The 1962 blueprints confirmed what his binder showed. Room 212 was the final room on the floor. Beyond it was only structural exterior masonry. There were no renovation notes, no secondary door entries, and no record of a room 213 ever being authorized or built. Armed with a steel tape measure and a heavy flashlight, Arthur walked back up to the second floor of Wing C 40 minutes later. He stopped dead at the end of the corridor. The recessed alcove was gone. The dark wooden door marked room 213 had vanished. In its place was the same smooth painted plasterboard and fire extinguisher cabinet that had always been there. Arthur knelt down and pressed his palm flat against the drywall. It was cold, solid, and dry. He knocked gently on the surface with his knuckles. The sound was dense and dull, indicating solid masonry directly behind the board, with no hollow cavity. The following morning, Arthur requested access to the local historical archive in town. He spent hours searching old regional newspapers from November 1963. Deep in the microfiche files, he uncovered a small article buried on page 4. In early November of that year, an annex extension for Miller Creek High School had been designed to house additional classrooms, including room 213. However, construction was abruptly canceled mid-project following a structural collapse during foundation work. The article mentioned that a night watchman who worked the site during construction went missing during his shift and was never found, leaving behind only his ring of brass keys. Arthur submitted his resignation 2 days later and never returned to facility management. Decades have passed, but the core questions of that night remain completely unanswered. Who was keeping the coffee hot inside a room that was never built? What was writing on that chalkboard night after night? And how did a room that only existed on canceled paper schematics manifest itself in physical space for a few brief hours? Today, Arthur lives in a single-story house with open floor plans. He keeps the untagged brass key in a wooden box on his nightstand, a permanent reminder that the world holds spaces that do not belong to us. Sometimes, when you walk down a quiet hallway late at night, the solid brick walls around you are not as permanent as they appear. Some rooms remain waiting just beneath the surface of reality, holding secrets that were never meant to be discovered. If you have ever encountered a structure or hidden space that seemed logically impossible, please share your account in the comments section below. We read every story sent in by our community. Do not forget to subscribe and activate notifications so you never miss another unsettling report. Until next time, stay watchful, double-check your surroundings, and stay safe in the dark.